Hello, hello.
Hello, Josephine.
Hello, Ruth.
This is Burden of Proof.
Hope you have your dancing shoes on today.
Yes, because we're going back to the 1920s.
1924, 100 years ago, to celebrate our 100th case.
Oh my gosh. And also, Elysia and I have adopted our 100-year-old personas. I am Ruth, and Elysia is Josephine.
I am Josephine.
And we are little old ladies who, what is your old lady trait?
What is not my old lady trait?
I mean, like, as an old lady, not your current old lady traits. I think, like, Nicholas's would be yelling at the sky. Yelling at the clouds. Get out of the sky.
Wow.
Get off my lawn.
I think I will adopt my grandmother's incessant need to, like, pick up anything on the floor that she saw.
Yeah.
And then even after we bought her like a little dustbuster so she could get it, she still just like picked it up. But it's going to be much harder for me because I'm much taller than my grandmother was. She was very short.
Oh, right. So she's closer to the ground.
She's closer to the ground.
Yeah. You're going to have a hunchback.
I absolutely am going to have a hunchback.
I think my old lady trait is going to be saying things I should not say because I already kind of do that. And it makes sense that it would get worse.
Yeah.
Be like,
I'll probably end up doing that.
Yeah.
My grandpa did that a lot.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty.
No, right. I hope I don't do it in an insulting way, but I can't make any promises.
Yeah, he had his moments. Anyway, if you're new here.
That's not our normal intro music.
No, but this is a celebration. So here we are.
We're going to the speakeasy.
Yeah.
Right?
We're bootlegging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timeline.
Timeline is during Prohibition.
No alcohol except if you're in a basement and the cops can't find you.
Yep, except there was alcohol in both of our cases that we're discussing today. So cool. Yeah, it's kind of a 2-in-1.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about what we're getting into today because we talked about how best to celebrate our 100th case. It's not our 100th episode because we put out a lot of episodes, but it's our 100th case.
It's our 100th case. I said that weird.
You did, yeah.
100th case.
Yes.
And this comes out right before our 2-year anniversary as well. So it's like a double celebration.
That's crazy. That's
Woohoo.
Insane. We've almost every single week for 2 years put out a podcast episode. I think we've only missed like 2, maybe 3 weeks.
I think 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's the best. It's the best. I can't call it a job yet, but one day we can call it our job, and it's the best job ever.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
Thank you guys for sticking out for 2 years. We have a lot of listeners that have been here since the very beginning. You guys are awesome.
Yes.
And we can't wait to see you for 5 years and 10 years, you know?
Woohoo. Hope so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's happening.
We'll keep going until I get dementia, and then it'll get real wacky.
It'll be better when Elysia gets dementia.
We also have one shout out. We have a new patron.
Yes. Hello, Misha.
Yes. So thanks for joining us, Misha.
We hope you can join us for our live stream, which is, if you're listening to this on drop day, we drop our episodes on Thursday. If you're listening to this on drop day, our live stream on Patreon is tomorrow at 8:00 Eastern. You can join us on Patreon to watch us live. We usually talk about our cases. We play some games. We answer some questions. We chit chat with you.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
It's a good time.
I think that's all our business.
Yep.
And like I said, that's not our normal music if you're a new listener, because we have quite a few newbies.
Yes. It does have very much a significant role in this episode, though.
Oh yeah, we're themed out.
Yes.
We have costumes. Check our social media for the costumes. Okay. And normally we have, as one hater described it, sexy music in the beginning.
Sexy.
It's so sexy.
It's also jazzy, but
yeah,
a little slower.
It's still like old-timey jazzy, but
yeah,
it doesn't sound like it's from a tin can. And
yes, it's not playing on the Victrola.
Yes, not on the Victrola.
All right. Are we ready?
I've got my drink. You need some ass with that, Pips?
We're also talking about a couple people who came from Kentucky.
Oh.
So they probably did sound a lot like my grandma.
Yeah, the Pepsi comment was an Elysia grandma throwback.
Yes. All right. So with today being our 100th case, I wanted to cover something special, and what better way than to discuss some infamous cases that took place exactly 100 years ago. Their significance has been ingrained in American culture, as they are also the inspiration for the play turned longest-running Broadway musical in American history. You may think of them as Roxie Hart and Velma Kelly, but their real-life counterparts were Beulah Annan and Belva Gaertner.
Beulah and Belva?
Belva.
Okay.
And if you aren't familiar with Broadway musicals, don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking about the musical Chicago.
Chicago. That's actually not how that goes, but
no,
it's just fun to say that.
Yeah.
There's a Chicago song trending on TikTok right now, in case you're wondering.
Oh, nice. So, of course, Beulah and Belva are not nearly as flashy names as Roxie and Velma, but...
At least Velma was kind of close.
Yeah, but they, Beulah and Belva were much more common names in the early 1900s. But before we dive into their crimes, I want to give some attention to the woman responsible for turning these stranger-than-fiction real-life stories into the play we all know.
Okay.
Maureen Dallas Watkins was born on July 27th, 1896 in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville.
You
putting too many syllables in that. Louisville.
I can't bring myself. Okay. My grandparents weren't from that area.
Okay.
The daughter of a reverend, she grew up strictly religious, and the family then moved to Indiana, where she attended Crawfordsville High School and was very active in her church, particularly in writing drama performances for fundraising. Though a playwright at heart since she was young, Maureen studied Greek and Latin at a Christian college before seeking work as a journalist. This was not the kind of work her reverend father would have hoped for, but Maureen thought it would be a good way to begin a career in writing. It's more structured.
Yeah.
And you earn a regular paycheck, or relatively regular paycheck.
More normal for sure.
With little to no experience, she met with the editor of the Chicago Tribune, and he gave her a shot as a crime reporter, of all things. Yeah, she actually did have an interest in crime, specifically. He was convinced that the pretty young, mild-mannered Maureen would gain the trust of sources that other reporters could not.
That's a good perspective.
Yeah. And he wasn't wrong. However, the position was what male journalists called a sob sister, which was a female reporter who wrote about female criminals. Reporting on female criminals was apparently beneath the male reporters, but in the roaring 20s of Chicago, there was a boom of violence amongst both men and women. So,
yeah,
in one of my sources, I believe they said that violent crime amongst women criminals went up like 400%.
Wow.
In 1 year in the early 1920s. Yeah. Despite her innocent and shy manner, Maureen was enthralled with the work of crime reporting because the psychological state of the criminals fascinated her. She also liked that the Chicago Tribune was open to different theories on why more women had become so violent. So of all the newspapers, even though the male reporters were calling her and the other female reporters like sob sisters, she actually didn't have to write that same way.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago Tribune was known for being more critical.
Right.
And so their pieces usually weren't as empathetic sounding as some of the other papers. And she liked that. Some believed that the reason women were becoming so violent was simply alcohol, prohibition,
right,
and the actions of men pushing them to become over-emotional.
Well, if I may,
yeah,
insert some information here. A lot of women struggled with prohibition because their husbands were alcoholics, and when they could no longer drink, they were going through withdrawals or just generally angry at home and were abusive.
Also, if they were alcoholics and they were seeking out alcohol during prohibition, there was a lot of bad batches because of the way it had to be made. So And that it will actually be a little bit of our story today.
Okay.
So those at the Chicago Tribune, though, were open to the possibility that women were suffering from mental health distress due to the city's violent culture in general. Either way you look at it, not very many people believed that, like, a woman could just snap and be violent for no apparent reason.
Right.
They blamed everything else, whether it be her husband, boyfriend, the culture, drinking, etc. Because it just wasn't in a woman's nature to be violent. That was the job of men.
Right. And they're pretty good at the violence part.
Now, this opened the door for Maureen's less emotional take on the stories. Maureen was very religious, and from the sound of it, she could be somewhat legalistic in that.
Okay.
Still, she stayed only a short time at the Tribune, perhaps because her experience with Murderess Row was enough to jumpstart her original passion for playwriting. After leaving the Tribune, she moved to New York, where she found work as a movie critic and took playwright classes. It was in one of those classes that she drafted A Brave Little Woman, and upon completing it, she took it to a female play broker, Laura Wilk. Not surprisingly, once Laura made her intention of producing it public, some men in the business then developed interest in it. And it ended up being bought by Sam Harris, who then changed the name to Chicago.
Chicago.
Maureen continued to write, reportedly from Hollywood, California, but never at the same level of success that the play had brought her. She at one point was hired to cover the story of another murderous wife and was deemed a, quote, sobless sister because she dealt nothing but the facts. So that was short-lived.
Yeah.
Still, she was held in high esteem in the literary world for her earliest work. And once retired, she settled here in Florida. Beautiful, sunny Florida.
Florida.
Until she passed away from lung cancer in 1969, leaving behind a legacy that runs to this day. Now.
I love that little history lesson. Thank you.
Yes. Now. Let's talk about Belva Gaertner, the woman who inspired Velma in Chicago. Born Belva Eleonora Businger.
Wow.
On September 14th, 1884 in Litchfield, Illinois, it wasn't long before she was thrust into adulthood. She married in 1901 at just 16 years old to one Harry Peppo. And the couple divorced just 4 years later in 1905.
Now, I don't mean to be a rude jerk, okay? But Harry Peppo?
Peppo.
That's really close to other things. Harry what?
No.
Moving on.
Moving on. And speaking of moving on, Belva moved on and was married a second time to a man by the surname of Overbeck. But it too was short-lived. Always one looking for excitement, she took up cabaret dancing under the name Belle Brown.
That's cute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it was there that she met her next husband, William Gaertner, a wealthy investor and businessman and 20 years her senior.
Well, she's always looking for things that are exciting.
William was not exciting.
He wants to go to bed. Let that man go to sleep.
He did.
He's an old man.
Yes. William frequented the cabaret and was taken with Belva. Despite there being far more physically attractive women in the place.
Whoa, what a read.
Belva had yeah, you'll see what I mean.
Okay.
Belva had a certain je ne sais quoi about her.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
How you say ugly.
Seriously, she's not talked about being ugly. She's just talked about being, everybody kind of talked about her as, like, she's classy. And there is something about her. Like,
okay.
She was very fashionable and classy is the word that they use.
Okay.
But they also don't call her ugly. They also, like, there's comparisons made. And I don't go into a ton of it, but they're obviously just like in the play Chicago or musical. There are multiple women on Murderess Row, and they all play a part, so to speak, in the story. But we would be here all day, like more than all day, if we were to cover every single person. But like that was part of it, was that Belva and Beulah were considered the top. They were considered the prettiest, the classiest, the whatever amongst all the murderesses. Okay. So
can I tell you a secret? I have never seen Chicago. I know.
Not even the movie?
I didn't know there was a movie, but I will watch it. We will have a movie night. I didn't know that.
With Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Okay, we're gonna have to watch that movie night. Sorry.
Yes.
I didn't know there was a movie.
There's a movie.
Because I was gonna look for tickets. Like it was touring a while ago, but it didn't like work out.
Yeah. Understandable.
So now I need to watch it.
Okay. So, back to William and Belva, who just had something about her. Something about Belva that many men in particular really liked.
Okay, so I take it back. Not how you say ugly. How you say interesting.
Yeah, men definitely found her interesting.
Okay.
Were drawn to her. But William really fell in love with her. The two married in 1917, but William sued for an annulment just 5 months later.
Ooh.
Not because he realized it was a mistake or that he didn't love her, but because he found out that her second divorce had never been finalized.
Oh, so they technically weren't even married. Like,
yeah. Once Belva settled all that business, she and William married again. However, it wasn't long before they separated again due to Belva's wandering ways.
Oh my goodness.
William, by far, was a patient husband, understanding that Belva loved cabaret life, and being much younger, she wasn't content with settled married life.
Right. That man wants to go to bed. She wants to go to the club.
Yes. It's said that he even gave his blessing when younger men would pick Belva up at their front door for a night out on the town.
Well, William, you just can't expect me to sit at home with you.
Pretty much. She would invite him along. She would invite William.
Right.
But he would always say, oh, I'm tired. I've had a long day, because he worked a lot.
Right. Yeah.
He was an inventor. He would like spend time in a lab inventing things. And then he was on the board of his company. So
wow.
He basically had 2 jobs. And yeah, so he was like, yeah, I'm tired. You go on. And he'd kiss her goodnight and be like,
honestly, it sounds like a dream. I mean, not my dream, but somebody's dream.
Yeah. Eventually, though, her drinking and wild lifestyle wore thin, and William divorced her. She moved into an apartment with her mother and made the news again, because the divorce was a big deal because he was so wealthy,
right,
etc. And it was pretty dramatic. But we don't have time for that. But look it up, because it's
maybe we'll talk about it on
like
our live stream.
PIs involved, and yeah, it's a whole thing. So she moves in with her mother into an apartment, and she makes the news again after the divorce for taking up a new career that was considered not ladylike.
Is she scripping?
No, she became a taxi driver.
Oh, very different from where I thought we were going.
Yes.
She said, give me that yellow car.
She loved cars. She loved driving.
Well, then taxi driver seems like a perfect fit.
But back then, it was scandalous for a woman to be driving, especially driving a taxi.
I mean,
scandalous.
Our boobs get in the way of the wheel, obviously. Can't drive. Duh.
Pretty much, it was scandalous as well, because everyone expected that she would look for another rich husband, because that's typically what.
But she didn't marry him because he was rich.
But Belva wasn't interested in the expectations of society.
No.
Especially high society. Within a few years, she started having an affair with a married car salesman named Walter Law.
All right, woman, we don't do that. I mean, you seem real cool. You seem like you're really cool. You're cooler than me, but don't do that.
She did that. William had been trying to win her back at that time, though. But Belva wasn't sure she wanted the old man back. After all, he couldn't keep up with her. And she was having a great time with William, who was nearly 10 years her junior.
Oh.
She was 38. Walter was 29.
Yeah.
And old William was 20 years older than her, so he's like 59.
Listen, she said, no, I'm doing what you did, and I found myself a little young buck.
Yeah. So, Walter and Belva had met when he sold her a new car, and then they slipped on into an affair over bottles of gin. Like we said earlier, it was 1924, the height of prohibition. So going out for drinks was especially sinister, but according to Walter's wife, he would tell her that he regularly would stay in some sort of contact with his clients who he sold cars to. Like he would tell her, oh, I have to show them how to drive, because cars were relatively a new thing. And he'd be like, oh, I have to help them practice driving. Or he'd say, I'm taking them out just as a thank you for, buying the car for me.
I can see how that happens. I mean, my mom got a car recently and they sent her a big old box of cookies, like to her home as a thank you.
Yeah. That's what he told his wife. But in fact, he and Belva liked going out drinking and dancing. And the relationship quickly became toxic. Can't imagine why.
When you say dancing, you mean the horizontal mambo.
Yeah, that too. And in the early morning hours of March 11th, 1924, things took a very dark turn. Despite having trouble for weeks, Walter took Belva out again, and he was driving her car. They picked up a bottle of gin from their dealer, despite both having already been drinking before they even went out. And Belva noticed this one hit them both a little different and thought maybe it was a bad batch that had been cut down too much, because they would use like industrial solvents to cut it down when they didn't have other more appropriate things. Yeah. So they both always got temperamental when drinking, but this was more than usual. He parked the car just a short distance from her apartment and gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. She tried to physically appeal to Walter, but he wouldn't even look at her. She invited him inside, but he still didn't budge. And he finally turned to her and said she needed to mind herself when they went out. Belva was known for being the life of the party. After all, she was a former showgirl. We don't really know 100% if she pulled out a handgun from somewhere in the car or her purse, or if she went into her apartment, got the handgun, and brought it back. That is up for debate from what I can tell. But at some point, she had a handgun that William had actually bought her for protection. And she shifted the conversation to like half teasing, half like dark twisted humor kind of thing. And started saying like, what would happen if someone tried to shoot us or to mug us while we sit on the dark street? I have this gun for protection. And it was kind of like an attempt to get him to come inside. Like she was trying to scare him and he was brushing her off. So it didn't work. And then she got even weirder and she bet him that she was a better shot than him.
She really wants to shoot this gun.
Walter laughed, knowing she had never actually gone shooting or been trained on shooting this gun. And he had been trained. And so he's like, haha, very funny. Like, I'm a good shot.
Right.
No way.
I mean, by 1920 standards, he's a catch. He's trained in shooting. He's trained in driving.
Yeah. But he would never find out if she was a better shot or not. I guess. Or maybe he did.
I'm going to say that she's a better shot.
About an hour later, Belva sat naked in her apartment, wondering how it all could have happened. The police knocked on her door. She put on a robe and answered, thinking it might be William checking on her. Because after all, William had been trying to win her back, so he typically called her every evening. And he would call until she answered.
Right.
And so she thought, well, maybe because I wasn't home and I didn't answer, he's showing up. But it was the officers, and they stepped inside the apartment and asked if she owned a gun. And Belva explained that she did, one that her husband, William Gaertner, had bought for her for protection. She then pointed at the heap of clothes on the floor and said, he bought me that coat too. To their surprise, they saw a green velvet dress, a white butterfly hat, and a lamb's wool coat piled on the floor, covered in blood. When they told her that they had just found Walter Law dead in her car, she just nodded.
Yeah, you did find him dead.
They said they spoke with a witness who saw her get out of the car and then return. And when they asked if she had gone inside to get the gun and then returned to shoot him, she said no, but then changed her answer to, I don't know, I was drunk. The officers took her to the station for further questioning. There, she told them that she and Walter had been seeing each other for a couple of months and it was their routine to go out a few times a week. She admitted that she knew he was married and said that his wife didn't seem to mind that he'd go out with another woman.
I think she probably does, but whatever.
Yeah. Belva told them that they had gotten back to her apartment around midnight and were saying goodnight when a shot was fired and she didn't know from where. She said she called out his name, but he didn't respond, so she grew scared that it was stick-up men.
Not the stick-em-ups.
Stick-em-ups. So she panicked and ran to her apartment.
And got naked.
And once the state prosecutor stepped in to ask more questions, Belva admitted that she and Walter had been fighting. She said that she had danced with another man while Walter was away from their table that evening, but she thought he must have seen because he was angry all the way home. She claimed that it frightened her because the last time they went out, he was angry as well and told her that if he ever saw her with someone else, he would wring her neck. The prosecutor moved on to more questions about the shooting, but Belva just cried, saying she couldn't remember anything. He asked her if she shot Walter, and with tears streaming down her face, she said, I don't see how I could. I thought so much of him.
Honestly, it's so iconic. I don't mean to I don't like to, not idolize, but, glamorize it. But
yeah.
It just imagine with the 1920s transatlantic. Well, I don't see how I could. I thought so much of him. It's just kind of cool. It's kind of cool. I mean, don't kill people.
No.
And there was absolutely no reason. But if they were, they were clearly very drunk off of a bad batch of alcohol. And yeah, there's no excuses.
Once the questioning was over, Belva was arrested on suspicion of murder. Now, Maureen Watkins had been at the station waiting and watching, hoping to catch the story. She watched as they brought Walter's distraught widow, Frida Law, in through the station, and then as Belva was brought out of the private room to sit and wait for a cell to open up. Maureen quickly realized that the call about a man committing suicide was all wrong. And in fact, this was actually a quite typical thing that happened, a drunken fight gone wrong and somebody was shot.
Right, but it's more dramatic because it's an affair.
Yes. Only as she observed Belva, she noticed it actually wasn't the typical situation. While Belva was clearly drunk, smelled, and looked overall disheveled, she was dressed and adorned much nicer than your typical.
She likes nice things.
She wore multiple rings with huge gemstones and obviously worth much more than what your typical jailbird could afford. Maureen and a group of other reporters gathered round her, and despite Belva saying she remembered nothing when talking to the prosecutor, she suddenly conjured up quite a lot. She admitted that she had been joking with Walter about which one of them was the better shot, and that when he laughed at her, she suggested that they toss a coin and the winner shoot the loser, and that they could take turns until one of them was actually shot.
Okay, moving on. I don't have.
But then she was like, but then I don't know what happened. Like, she remembers saying that, but then she didn't know what happened after that. They weren't sure what to make of her, but they knew that she had a quality that made people want to listen. Then one of them recognized her from her cabaret dancing days. And they also then realized that she had already been in the news for the scandalous split from her husband, William, because she had committed adultery. So they ran the story labeling her the flip coin murderess.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm. William Gaertner was obviously shocked by the news of Belva's arrest and portrayed in Maureen's front page story as being disappointed in her. Nevertheless, he stood by her and even hired attorneys to represent her. There was a continuous rotation of reporters wanting to talk to Belva, and she was always one to enjoy storytelling and attention. The day after the story broke and they went into the station for any updates, Belva had some of them convinced she may have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then she randomly said, "I think I can get my coat cleaned so it'll look all right again." One of the reporters asked what she meant, and she described the beautiful coat and explained that the police had taken it, but that it was rather expensive, normally going for nearly $3,000.
Baby, this is not the time or the place. What a flex, though.
Officers interrupted at that moment and called everyone into another room for an inquest, which was sort of a precursor to a grand jury. The prosecutor laid out their theory that Belva preferred younger men, but as she was aging, it was getting more difficult to snag them, so she was desperate to hold on to Walter. When Walter told her he was done with the affair, she killed him. There was testimony from multiple individuals, including the owner of the cafe that Belva and Walter frequented, and officers on the case. But the most incriminating testimony came from one of Walter's co-workers, Paul Goodwin. Paul claimed that Walter had told him just days before the shooting that he planned to take out more life insurance on himself because Belva had threatened to kill him.
Okay, but let's go out again. Well,
right.
I don't mean to victim blame. I never do, but I'm just a little confused.
Yeah. He said Walter told him that 3 weeks prior, she had locked him in her apartment and threatened to stab him with a knife unless he stayed. It was therefore surmised that Belva had tried to get Walter to go inside the apartment that night, and he refused, fearing he would be locked in again and threatened. And so, angered by the rejection, she pulled the gun, and when Walter tried to stop her, she pulled the trigger.
Okay.
Belva brazenly continued to talk to the press after the inquest, claiming that Walter never got along with his wife and that he told her it was Frida who asked him to purchase more life insurance because she had gone to a fortune teller who predicted his death.
Oh my gosh, somebody find the fortune teller, put her on the phone, put her on the gramophone. I gotta know.
About 20 minutes later, they ended the unofficial press conference and announced that Belva would be formally charged with the murder of Walter Law. Belva's arrival to Murderous Row was just as much of a spectacle. Reporters followed as she was escorted to her cell, while the other inmates watched in disbelief that such a classy woman was being jailed.
I can't believe they've done this.
Surrounded by other inmates who had received tough sentences, including Sabella Nitti, the first woman sentenced to hang in Chicago for the murder of her husband, Belva quickly realized that she must mold her image in the press. The sob sister stories focused on her sobriety and salvation. She reportedly led the inmates in singing hymns and started following her lawyer's advice to limit what she said to the press. Still, her ego would get in the way, and when she spoke with Maureen Watkins, she went on about how silly it was for them to think she murdered Walter. After all, she'd had plenty of men and could always find another, so there was no reason for her to kill him.
Yeah, I didn't think that their story about her needing to, I do believe that she did kill him. I'm not saying that. But I don't think that their story of her like latching on to a younger man is really like the problem. I think they were just drunk.
Perhaps. We don't really know. Yeah. She went on about how men always cause women trouble, and she just needed broad-minded men on the jury to realize what happened. At the time, women were not permitted to sit on juries. So she could only hope that the men who were appointed would be sympathetic to her feminine woes.
Not her feminine woes.
The newspapers also started helping this PR move by competing with one another to make Belva look her best in the photos that were published. Photo artists would touch up the pictures to make her look younger, slimmer, more beautiful. Belva seemed to be enjoying all of the attention, but she would soon be upstaged by a new, younger, and much more actually beautiful murderess.
Oh, she's not going to like being upstaged.
She doesn't, but she's smart.
Okay.
Belva's smart. Beulah Annan was born Beulah May Sheriff on November 18th, 1899 in Owensboro, Kentucky. Just like Belva Gaertner, Beulah was first married at just 16 to a man named Perry Stevens, whom she had a son with. When her son was still an infant, the couple divorced and she left her son to be raised by Perry's family. Beulah then met Albert, or Al, as we will call him, Annan, and moved to Chicago, where they got married in 1920. Al was a mechanic at a local garage, and Beulah found work as a bookkeeper at Tennant's Model Laundry. It was there that she met Harry Kalstead, and the two began an affair, and Beulah was quite smitten over Harry.
I mean, she's got it bad.
On April 3rd, 1924, Harry called to let her know he'd be over to see her while Al was at work. Beulah told him that she wouldn't be around, but he knew it was just a lie and that she was playing hard to get. So, before long, Harry was knocking on the back door of her apartment. She answered the door in her camisole, confirming Harry's suspicion that she did in fact want him there. I mean,
yeah. He was right.
He offered to get her a drink, but claimed not to have any money. Despite him having a good job as a delivery man for Tennant's Laundry, he always claimed to be broke. Frustrated, she offered him $1 and waited as he scampered off to make the purchase. While waiting, Beulah put on her favorite record, Hula Lou, by the California Ramblers, Milton Charles, and Wayne King, which is the song that we open this episode with today.
Woohoo!
Harry finally returned with 2 quarts of wine. He knew she could no longer handle liquor, especially moonshine, after she had a bad reaction the last time.
We all have that. We all have an alcohol that we cannot drink.
Though she wasn't going to give up drinking altogether, she enjoyed it far too much. In fact, one of my sources said that when she would overdo it on liquor, she would just take a couple days off from work and go visit her doctor, and the doctors would then give her morphine, which is like crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we wonder why we have such an addiction epidemic. They're like, oh, yeah, one substance, let's just give you another one. It's fine.
So her and Harry snuggled up on the couch and continued listening to Hula Lou while sipping on wine. As they sat Beulah began to feel irritated about having to buy the wine yet again.
Right, that is annoying. Yeah, I can imagine.
She turned to him and accused him of lying about money. He often said he would take her out and show her a good time, but he never did because he ultimately claimed to not have money right then. Like, I was going to take you out. Babe. I was going to take you out.
I'm telling you, when I turn my $200 paycheck into $1,000 with my friend who's going to have me invest in his business where I get other people to invest in the business and it's not a pyramid scheme, I told you, I will give you money.
Yeah. I will take you out. Well, she made her accusations and Harry didn't respond, which just angered Beulah more.
Right.
Frustrated her more. So she thought, well, he must have other girlfriends. But instead of saying that, she decided to try and make him jealous and told him that she had another man on the side. She claimed that his name was Johnny, and he was a real gentleman who would take her out dancing. Harry became enraged and asked if she had lain with this Johnny the way she had with him. Apparently,
I can't with the lane.
Apparently, he had never thought to be jealous of Al because he just assumed that she never did anything with Al anymore.
They're not laying together.
I mean, Al sleeps in that bed every night, but she lays with me in that bed.
Right.
Al just sleeps there.
He lays there, but I lay there.
Exactly.
I hate it here.
So Harry began name calling, and to put it nicely, and she grew angrier, saying he was nothing but a dirty goddamn jailbird.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's being gross.
So Harry jumped up yelling, I'm going to quit you.
I'm gonna quit you.
I'm going to quit you. And Beulah moved toward the bedroom. 2 hours later, Beulah called Tennant's Laundry and asked for Billy, Harry's brother-in-law. Betty, the woman who answered, told Beulah he was busy. So then she asked for Moo, to which Betty sighed and said, you know he hasn't been here all day. Moo was actually Beulah's pet name for Harry. So apparently the two weren't doing a real good job keeping their affair concealed at work.
Well, first of all, you have a pet name, and it's horrible. It's bad. It's a bad one.
Yeah. So Beulah told Betty, well, I'd had an appointment with Harry around noon, but he never showed up. And then after that phone call, she suddenly came to and realized she had been dancing to Hula Lou repeatedly for hours while Harry laid on the bedroom floor dying. Next, Beulah called Al at work and said he needed to come home right away because she had shot a man. She said he'd been trying to make love to her and she shot him in self-defense.
I mean, he was trying to lay with her, yeah.
So Al rushed home to find Beulah sobbing and Harry in a pool of blood. When he asked her what happened, she reiterated what she said on the phone, but added that she'd waited to call anyone hoping he would get up and leave.
The Delulu?
Yeah, there's a lot of Delulu in this one. Al wanted to believe her, but knew they had to call the police. And this is where it gets even weirder. When he calls the police, Beulah tried to stop him. But then when she hears somebody answer the line, she actually grabbed the receiver out of Al's hand and screamed, I've killed my husband.
No, you haven't. Do you have plans to? Because you haven't killed your husband. You've killed your lover, your lying partner.
Yeah. When police arrived to the Annans' apartment, Al actually tried to take the blame. Poor Al was
He's being so kind. I mean,
I arrived from work and this man was going after my wife, and so I shot him. Beulah hadn't talked to that point and was still sobbing. But when she heard Al take credit for the shooting, she stopped him. Not because she's like, no, you'll get in trouble.
Yeah, no.
No, because she had like this weird protective, like, no, Harry's mine. You don't get to take credit for shooting him because he's mine. Everything about him is mine.
Because they had a very toxic relationship.
Yeah. So she admitted that she had shot him, but said that it was because he kept coming towards her. And then one officer asked, in the back? Because he had been shot in the back.
Slay.
She didn't seem to hear him, though. But then all of a sudden she like drifted off and she fainted and nobody caught her. She just like hit the floor. She awoke to even more officers and the assistant district attorney, Roy Woods, in their apartment. Still disoriented, she began sobbing again when he reminded her that she had shot an intruder and asked why she did it. She said she didn't know why she'd done it. By the time they were taken to the police station, reality set in for Al because of her behavior.
Well, right, yeah.
So he is at the police station, just losing his shit, okay? And he starts going on saying, I was a fool. I was a mere meal ticket. But obviously, if you haven't caught on yet, times were different and they just like allowed the reporters to hang out there.
Yeah.
So there's reporters everywhere trying to overhear things. And Maureen Watkins heard him. And then the reporters made their way down the hall to find Beulah still in her camisole. And I think she had like a jacket or a robe, but like wasn't really covering up. And she seemed unfazed by her lack of appropriate dress. And especially at that time, it was a big deal. She seemed very open to talking, especially to Maureen. She claimed that she barely knew Harry and that he had come into the apartment that afternoon to, quote, try and make me love him. I should say it with her. She had a Kentucky accent.
He tried to make me love him.
Yeah. She stuck with the story that she warned him she would shoot, but he continued towards her.
I mean, you gave him a warning.
No one believed the story, but Beulah repeated it over and over and over.
Well, right, if you say it louder, then it's true.
And enough times, yes. That is, until question in more depth, when she admitted she and Harry had been having an affair for a couple of months. She explained that they fought, and when she headed toward the bedroom, Harry followed and went after Al's gun that was lying on the bed. Al usually kept it under his pillow, according to her, but she swears that it was out on the bed.
Just like for funsies? Like,
according to Al, he always kept it in his nightstand drawer.
Right, I think he knows where his gun is.
So, Beulah said that she grabbed the gun and pointed it at Harry. The officer asked, what did he do then? Harry said he was leaving, she said. So, did he go for his coat and hat, they asked? She said, no, he didn't get that far.
Oh.
Why not? Because I shot him.
Said, you're not leaving. Bang, bang.
She went on to explain she was in disbelief when he fell against the wall, saying, you actually shot me. Beulah ran to his side, telling him, no, you're not shot. You'll be okay. And then she washed his face before she realized that the neighbors and people might have heard, and maybe now they can hear her crying. So she turned the record, Hula Lou, back on to cover the sound of her crying and danced a little to distract herself, to help calm down.
Oh, this is so eerie.
The problem is that she repeated the record for at least 2 hours before she made that phone call to Betty at tenant's laundry, and then almost another hour before she made the phone call to Al.
That's so terrifying to think about. I mean, any song for that long is going to get creepy because there's just obviously something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps not realizing what the confession actually meant, she continued to talk about how she was glad she did it because it ended the affair that was wrecking her life.
Well, girl, you also wrecked his life. Like, you killed him. He is no longer alive.
Even worse, the newspapers reported that she had confessed to dancing with the corpse of her dead lover.
Which is not what she said, but it is good.
No.
It is good news. It's quality television.
The gruesome image was going to be difficult to distance herself from, despite it not being true. Luckily for Beulah, the high-profile case of a beautiful young murderess was of interest to some of the best defense attorneys in town. So, despite Al not having as much cash as they'd asked for, they still took her on as a client. Al, being the practical man that he was, didn't give up on Beulah, despite his previous meltdown in front of police and press.
I'm gonna go on a limb. And say that he probably should have. You know, I think there are a few times where giving up on somebody is okay. Murder trial, when you know they did it, is probably one of them. I think that's okay.
I think murder trial, even if they didn't do it, but they were having an affair.
Oh, right.
Is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away.
Okay.
But you're not wrong.
Right.
I'll say that.
Okay.
Photographers and reporters alike were taken with Beulah as soon as she arrived for her inquest. She looked beautiful and composed herself in the perfect, mild-mannered, melancholy way that implied that she was incapable of being a cold-blooded killer.
Could it be me? Do you see how soft my curls are?
When she spoke with Maureen Watkins, she admitted she wished they'd let her see Harry's body, but she knew it would also make her feel worse. Beulah told other reporters that she wasn't really sure she'd ever really loved any man, but Harry paid her much attention, thought she was pretty, and bought her booze.
I mean, what else can a girl ask for?
The inquest began, and the prosecutor opened with the theory that aligned with her own confession. She shot Harry Kalstead because he was going to leave her.
Right. I mean, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck.
However,
okay,
with the knowledge that Harry had a criminal record for assault on a woman, her defense attorneys quickly objected.
Well, that's fair. He did seem like he was really aggressive in their fight. I mean, just from like your storytelling, at least.
Yeah. Their angle was that Harry went after the gun as well, and she had merely gotten to it first. She was but a young woman from small-town Kentucky, caught up in the chaotic life of Chicago. Still, nothing could excuse what happened after the shooting. Like I said, they had established nearly 3 hours had passed with her listening to Hula Lou on the Victrola before she called Al. And according to the coroner, Harry had died within a half an hour of his arrival, which meant that he bled out very slowly and may have survived had she called for help sooner.
That's so sad. That's so horrific.
It was determined that Beulah would be charged for murder. Unlike Belva, who held her head high, Beulah was initially feeling scared and defeated on Murderous Row. She spent the first 24 hours in her cell talking to reporters through tears. Fortunately for Beulah, everyone, including the newspapers, believed her beauty would save her.
I didn't know it was a superpower. Thought it was genetics, but okay.
She must have started to believe it herself because she quickly changed her tune and her story. She corrected every reporter who came to see her after she was incorrectly aged at 29, when in fact, She was 23.
Oh, she's 23 now?
Yeah, no, she actually was young.
Oh, she was actually. Okay.
She was actually young. She was born in 1899.
Okay.
So 23 might not be accurate. I think she would have been like 26.
Right,
in
but
all actuality.
But she wasn't 29.
But she wasn't 29. But she was still holding on to 23.
I mean, aren't we all?
I'm way past that.
I'm not even 23 yet.
I know. She told them, quote, being accused of murder is bad enough, implying that the mistake was insulting. How dare you call me 29?
Slay.
Her story about the shooting also changed once her attorneys were coaching her on what to say. They were determined to get their client off the hook, claiming self-defense. Beulah believed she had the press right where she wanted them. After all, she had followed several of the murderess' stories in the newspapers and learned some things, particularly from Belva Gaertner. So, when Belva first introduced herself at the jail and suggested that they do an interview and photo together, Beulah declined.
Okay.
No thanks.
No, thank you.
She continued interviews discussing how bad she felt for Al and how she supposed she had just been swept away by Harry's attention to her. That is, until Al gave an interview to one of the Sob Sister reporters. In it, he said he didn't understand what went wrong in their marriage because he worked really hard and brought home every dime he made so that they could have a comfortable life. Now, that being said, they were comfortable. They had a roof over their heads, but they were not wealthy by any means.
Right.
And that was part of her problem.
Okay.
That's part of what upset Beulah, is that they both had to work so hard just to keep it together, basically. Also, if Beulah had been honest, she blamed Al for her cheating because he never offered any excitement or romance. He never took her out. He never wanted to go dancing. Her next interview, she slipped up and claimed that her affair was for Al's benefit because having Harry kept her busy, and then fell apart saying that she should have never taken the job at Tennant's Laundry because she wouldn't have met Harry. So I think it was like she started to go down that trail of like, really, it benefited Al.
Right.
Because Harry kept me happy. Otherwise, I would have wanted to leave Al altogether.
Or kill him.
And then she realized, oh, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
And so she burst into tears and was like, I just never should have been working. If I hadn't have been working, I wouldn't meet a man. I should have stayed home. But she hated staying home. She hated housework.
So, girl, I'm getting some mixed signals, okay?
Basically, she was all over the place. And no one really knew what happened. But they knew she entranced everyone with her beautiful auburn hair, bright blue eyes, pretty face, and southern lilt. Beulah made front page news repeatedly and began receiving letters and gifts from all over. Some man sent her a steak dinner.
Oh, okay. Go
I was
off,
like,
thing.
Man, they were really like loosey-goosey in the prisons back then, were they not? Like,
they're just letting people bring stuff in.
Yeah. She had several marriage proposals. Even though she was still married to Al, I don't know. She loved the attention and paid no mind to any jealousy the other women on Murderous Row may have felt. On April 21st, 1924, Beulah, Belva, and Sabella Nitty, the woman that I mentioned a little bit ago, were scheduled for hearings. They had specific days that apparently it was Women's Day in the courtroom. So they'd bring in all the women that were due to have hearings on the same day. The courtroom was packed with spectators and reporters, and the vibe seemed to be nothing but support for Beulah, but they were interested in seeing all the women together specifically. Belva and Beulah, of course, strolled in like celebrities on red carpet in their nice attire.
Yeah, they look good.
Their fur collars. Their 1920s, like, bullet hats.
Yeah.
I think they're called. When reporters asked all three women to pose for a picture, Belva and Beulah gave their best solemn stares, while Sabella beamed. She was the one who was sentenced to death, but it had been reversed, and she was there to request bail. So she was thrilled.
Yeah.
She was
She's having a good day.
Happy to be there. The public may have been led to believe there was a real camaraderie amongst the three women. But the truth was, Sabella's story didn't look anything like Belva or Beulah's, and initially, she often told them in her broken English that they would get to leave jail because they're younger, prettier, and classier. The press was awful to Sabella. Absolutely awful. She was an immigrant from Italy.
Yeah.
She didn't really speak English when she was arrested, so she had like no idea what was happening at her trial. It was a mess. But she did win a retrial from her appeal, which is how she then got a different sentence. And after all of that happened, it did kind of change the way the women in Murderess Row interacted. They had learned some things through Beulah and Belva being there. They also learned some things from the attorneys that took Sabella's case and took it to retrial.
Right.
They watched and they learned some things. And so they all started kind of working together for at least a few weeks to help one another, hoping that maybe they too can spin their stories to like get sympathy from the public, which seemed to help in these women crimes. The thing is that Sabella wasn't wrong though when she said, "You're pretty, you'll go free."
She's not wrong. You're pretty, for sure.
There had been just over 100 some women charged with violent crimes over the years up to that point in Chicago, and not a single one of the pretty or wealthy ones were ever convicted.
And you know what? It still happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this sounds crazy to us today, given how flooded our courts are. But even with extensions, Belva and Beulah waited no more than a few months to find out their fate. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So Beulah's trial actually took place first, even though her crime was a few weeks after Belva's, because Belva's attorney had asked for a longer extension. He wanted to wait until the press was over their infatuation with Beulah so that Belva could like win them over again.
Yeah, she needs her moment.
And Belva had tried really hard. Like initially she was threatened by Beulah coming into the prison, but she knew, hey, I have to work with this girl, which is why she tried to like introduce herself and say, hey, why don't we do a thing together? Yeah. And Beulah was like, I got this. I don't need you.
I don't need you.
However, his extension sort of turned out to be a moot point when 3 days after those hearings on April 21st, a new beautiful murderess would join the cell block and be splashed all over the headlines again.
Oh my gosh. They're really having a go of it this time, aren't they?
So, Beulah was clearly threatened by the change in attention as well. And so she called reporters to give them an update, a new twist in the story.
Yeah, you got to keep yourself relevant.
In what would be her final account, she claimed that she was actually pregnant with Harry's child, and that it was,
oh my gosh,
and that it was that news that caused him to go into a rage and lunge for the gun, but she got it first and she shot him out of fear. She then cried that Al would probably never take her back, but that her life was over anyway. Now, was she pregnant?
Don't think so.
All we know is that she certainly didn't look pregnant.
Yeah.
And she never birthed a child after that. So
that's all we know.
That's all we know. Soon after Beulah faced a jury with Al there to support her and Maureen Watkins there to speculate doubt about her newest story, she did a fantastic job playing the part of the remorseful housewife as she stepped into the courtroom. Jury selection went slowly but well for Beulah. With 5 bachelors and mostly younger, attractive men, a promising outcome looked possible. However, the judge ruled to allow her initial confession into evidence, which was a blow to the defense.
Yeah, that's not good.
Since her initial statements were given to Prosecutor Woods, he actually stepped down from the case so that he could testify if necessary.
Okay.
This meant her defense would now be up against a less experienced prosecutor, so it was like a good thing and a bad thing all in one.
It was a risk for sure.
Yes.
But
Beulah's attorneys had come up with a work greater than fiction about how Harry forced his way into the apartment, and the only mistake Beulah made was to drink the wine he'd brought, which she did so just to appease him. They claimed he was shot in the back because when Beulah went for the telephone, not the gun, but the telephone to call for help, Harry went for the gun, but she was closer, so she grabbed it first, and the two spun around grappling, which is how he spun around and she shot him in the back.
Okay, that's a stretch, guys.
Billy Wilcox, Harry's brother-in-law, who had been called, this is another weird thing that they did back then that now they would never ever do. They actually called Billy Wilcox, Harry's brother-in-law, to come to the Annans' apartment, to the crime scene, the night of the shooting.
Oh, yeah, that would not happen.
Yeah. So he was there, and he was able to testify that night when he was there, he heard Beulah not being coerced, because that was part of her testimony in court, saying that she was coerced during that initial statement. That's why they were trying to get the initial statement thrown out. He said she was not coerced. In fact, Prosecutor Woods had to tell her, quote, "You don't frame anything with me," because when she woke up and Prosecutor Woods was there telling her, like, okay, this is what's happened, why did you do this? She actually tried to convince him to frame it like an accident. And he said, no, you don't frame anything with me.
Not my job.
Several others testified against Beulah, and the evidence seemed to be piling on. Maureen Watkins continued the story through the trial, every day updating, and made her belief that Beulah was guilty absolutely clear. The following day, Beulah took the stand and told her final version of her story. She put on her greatest performance and reiterated what her attorneys already claimed in their opening statements. Her cross-examination was tough, but Beulah managed to regain confidence after the initial shakeup and firmly denied all the accusations. Whether it was her beauty and performance on the stand or the fact that Chicago was in the midst of turmoil due to citizens gaining knowledge about how corrupt the local government was, Beulah Annan was found not guilty.
That's insane, dog.
She was clearly stunned as the verdict was read, but as the courtroom broke out in gasps and cheers, she gained some composure, went over to the jury, and began shaking their hands and kissing them on the cheeks.
Which, again, you can't do that now.
Yeah. Belva Gaertner's trial began just a couple weeks later, in June of 1924. While she was not viewed in the same light Beulah was, she had one thing Beulah did not. Money. She walked into the courtroom dressed as classy as ever and was just as impressive as Beulah in her performance. While Belva's trial was just as much a spectacle, it also had a more serious tone. In this case, the prosecution was asking for the maximum penalty, death or life in prison. The jury selection was also slow going as both sides were very particular. It was a mixed bag and difficult to know which direction the group would lean. Maureen Watkins covered the trial much like she had in Beulah's, pulling no punches. She pointed out that Frida Law, Walter's wife, appeared more nervous than Belva did, despite Belva being the one facing the death penalty.
But okay, but she's supposed to be nervous. Like, I would be nervous.
Yeah.
She's looking at the person who killed her husband.
Yeah. Maureen also pointed out that the defense was based on nothing but Belva's lack of memory about what happened.
Yeah, she just doesn't know. I do not recall.
The prosecution submitted Belva's clothing from the night of the shooting and had the testimony of forensics about the testing they had conducted, proving that it was covered in human blood.
Right.
So, I mean, it was pretty simple testing, but still.
That's all they can do, really.
The coroner testified that Walter Law did not shoot himself based on the lack of powder burns, but the defense countered very dramatically, stating they were not denying that Belva was at the scene and got blood on herself, but they said, "Give me this gun, let me shoot myself," and they literally demonstrated with an empty pistol how they believed Walter could have shot himself.
I mean, sounds a lot like a case that we all know and love, and that we've all talked about before. We love a good courtroom demonstration.
Yeah. It's very dramatic.
It's so dramatic.
Very demure.
Very demure, very cutesy. Actually, it's not demure.
No, it's not. I'm just kidding. All right. So Belva sat through most of the trial calmly, only showing tension or nervousness when her bloodied clothing was displayed, and impatience as the police officer described the clothing.
Yeah, she's like, I can describe that. I can tell you the make, the model,
That's probably what it was. You're not describing that accurately, sir.
Actually, sir, I can tell you, like, the SKU number. You said it was $2,500. It was $3,000. Okay?
Yeah.
Get it together.
Other than countering some of the testimony, the defense waived both an opening and closing statement, claiming that the entire case was circumstantial, and then they moved for dismissal.
I mean, facts.
The judge denied dismissal, and the defense responded that that's fine, because they believed that if the jury found her guilty, the Supreme Court would overturn.
That's a bold decision.
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
The prosecution moved to remove the death penalty, but still sought life in prison.
Right.
About 7 hours later, the jury entered a verdict of not guilty.
That's crazy. I mean, it's hard. Like I said, those courtroom demonstrations typically are pretty persuasive.
Yeah. Belva gasped and both laughed and cried at the same time. And just like Beulah, she practically ran over to the jury and started shaking hands. Meanwhile, and this is the sad part of this one, at least in Harry's case, like, he didn't have anybody else that was like,
yeah.
I mean, he had his brother-in-law and like some family.
Well, right.
But he wasn't married himself, and or he was, but he was estranged from his wife or something. But Frida Law sat in the back of the room in tears, embracing her sister. And then all she said to reporters as she left the courtroom was, like, there's no justice here in Chicago, in this godforsaken city or something like that. Following their acquittals, the women took rather different paths. So remember how you said you thought it was maybe not the best idea for Al to support Beulah?
Yeah. I still stand by that. I don't think it was.
Beulah announced to the press within days that she had left Al, stating he's too slow.
Girl, that man just stood by through a murder trial. At least give him like a couple months.
In 1926, she sued for divorce, claiming he had deserted her.
No. You know what? I'm gonna say something. If you're going to leave your husband after a murder trial, that you're on trial for, you have to wait as long after the trial as you were in the jail for.
Well, that was only a few months.
Well, right. Yeah. That's my point. If you were in jail for a few months, you have to stay.
Actually, she wasn't. She was like her crime was April 3rd and her trial was like in the middle of May. So she was only in there for like 6-7
you got to
weeks.
give him at least a couple weeks, right? Like that I think would be fair.
Well, shortly after she officially divorced Al, she married a professional boxer by the name of Edward Harlib. Edward's brother told reporters that he had never divorced his first wife, though.
Again, they're not legally married.
It worked out regardless, because Beulah left Edward after just 3 months, claiming he was cruel to her.
Girl, I don't want to hear that from you.
She was then engaged to a fourth man named Abel Marcus, but the two never made it to the altar. Beulah developed tuberculosis and died March 10th, 1928, at just 28 years old.
Wow.
In contrast, Belva remarried William Gaertner after her acquittal.
As she should.
He started the divorce process again, though.
Oh my gosh.
In 1926, claiming she was an abusive alcoholic and she was convicted of drunk driving in November of that year. However, he never finalized the divorce, and the two reconciled by 1930 and then moved to Europe for several years. They moved back to Illinois at some point before William's death in 1948, at which point Belva moved to Pasadena, California to live with her sister. And Belva lived to the ripe old age of 80 and then passed away from natural causes on May 14th, 1965.
Wow.
Maureen Watkins' play Chicago first opened in Chicago in 1927, like just not long after all of this took place, which Belva Gaertner actually attended the opening. Beulah Annan at some point had told the press she looked forward to seeing it, but I didn't find any sources that confirmed that she did, and that's like the year that she got sick, so I'm guessing she never got to see it.
Wow.
So that's your real life Roxie and Velma.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What a cool story. And it's still running today. You can still see it.
It's still big time. Now you...
Yeah.
And for a long time, you could see it with Jinx Monsoon in it.
I know. No more Jinx.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost just said rest in peace. Jinx isn't dead.
Oh, yeah. No. Jinx is not dead. Thank goodness.
Yes.
So, there you go. That's all I got.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I know that was plenty.
It's kind of a long one.
Listen.
But it's 2 cases in one. So,
yeah, you get a double whammy and it's themed. I love a theme.
Yeah.
So great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our awesome listeners who have listened for 100 cases now.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And if after 100 cases you feel it in your heart to leave us a good review,
that would be awesome.
To leave us 5 stars, we would forever be grateful.
Yes, we've talked about it before, but it is the best way to support indie podcasters. There's no big production team behind this. It is Elysia and me and her audio engineer husband. So it's just us, and we love and appreciate all the support you guys can give us, and that's a great way to do it.
Absolutely.
And like I mentioned earlier, if you're on our Patreon, if you're a member of our Patreon, it's $3 a month. We have live streams once a month. Our live stream for this month is tomorrow. Our patrons also get to choose a case every month, and they get outtakes and things that aren't included in the main episode. And what else do they get? They get always ad-free episodes.
Mm-hmm. And we hope to add more to that in the future.
Yes, exactly.
We can only do that with your support.
Yes. And shout out again to Misha.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have an emoji for this week. I think if you're still listening and you want to participate in Sunday shoutouts on the social medias.
Yes, on the socials.
I believe what you should do is tell us if you've seen Chicago.
Yes. If you've seen Chicago, let us know. Regardless of your answer, you'll be included in Sunday shoutouts.
Yeah.
Or like last week, it was a Monday shout out because I was busy on Sunday and forgot to even I just forgot it was Sunday. I've had it before where I'll text Alicia, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do Sunday shout outs. Can you do it? And she'll do it. But I just completely forgot what day it was.
Check.
But most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's a Sunday shout out.
Either way, you'll get a shout out at some point
on our Instagram and Facebook stories.
And if you're due a shout out and we forget or miss it somehow, let us know.
Yeah, bang on our DMs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll always get to you.
All right.
Until next time.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Burden of Proof Pod and email us at burdenofproofpod@gmail.com.